Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm Frederick County Executive Jan Gardner, and I'm pleased today to welcome as my guest Lori Moser, who is a strong advocate for work zone safety. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you here today, and I thought maybe you could start off by sharing with our viewers a little bit about yourself and how you became such an advocate for work zone safety.
Sure. I'm a retired special ed teacher and was very happily involved in my career when life suddenly turned for our family. My husband was a state highway employee, had worked for State Highway for 21 years, and was working along the roads on a beautiful summer day when he was struck and killed in a work zone crash here in Frederick County. And at that point, our family found purpose in advocating for safer work zones to spare other families from going through this type of tragedy.
So, I really think it's wonderful that you honor your husband in this way, because there are certainly a lot of workers who are out there working along our roadways. And right now is the time of year with spring coming that we have the summer construction season coming, and we have major road projects and major bridge projects that are about to start. And we also have just a lot of road repair, a lot of people who will be mowing and doing maintenance along roads. So sometimes while we have work zones clearly defined because they're permanent and going to be there for, well, they're not permanent, but they're there for a number of weeks. We also have a lot of temporary work zones that may just be there for a day or even sometimes for a few hours. So people really need to be aware that there's going to be more people out working along the roads and to think about the safety of those people that are there. But you have an interesting statistic about work zone accidents that speak to safety for everyone.
You're right, and actually I didn't realize this myself until I started this advocacy effort, and it was a few years into it that it actually became very meaningful to me. What I found is that although Rick was a worker killed in a work zone, statistically motorists and passengers are 80% more likely to be involved in a work zone crash and be injured or killed. And so it's kind of an anomaly that Rick was killed in a highway work zone crash when you look across the national statistics. And what's shocking to me about that is that families are impacted in another way through losing family members in work zone crashes. And most of these crashes truly are preventable. It really is just up to drivers to be paying attention and doing what they need to do, driving responsibly in work zones, and many of these accidents can be avoided.
Well, I think it is important for people to realize that the risk of harm is statistically higher to them than it is to the actual worker that's out on the construction or the road maintenance crew. And I think that's really an important point. And we talk a lot about distracted driving these days, with people paying attention to their cell phones, talking on the phone, texting, even though it's against the law in the state of Maryland, or really just being engaged with other people in their own vehicle, having a conversation with kids misbehaving in the back. And so, to pay attention and not be distracted is really fundamental to good driving.
It is, and it's something that people just don't really think about because there are so many distractions when we are driving. And work zones are particularly dangerous. A lot of people talk about, work zones aren't dangerous unless they're active work zones, meaning workers are present working there. And that really isn't proving to be true, because work zones just by nature are inherently dangerous. Shifting lanes still are in existence when workers aren't there, or narrowing lanes, reduced speeds. Of course, when workers are present, there's equipment coming in and out often on the long-term projects. On the short-term or temporary work zones, which is the type of work zone my husband was conducting when he was killed, that was just meant to be a 15-minute operation. The only thing protecting him that day was the safety line along the shoulder of the road, his green vest that he had on, and along the other side of the ramp that he was on were 2 trucks with arrow boards flashing to indicate a work zone. Unfortunately, the driver who struck him that day did not take notice of any of those protective devices, and so it was Rick's life that was compromised in that crash.
And certainly life-changing for your family, and I would think also for the family, for that person who was the driver. So it's a very bad situation for everybody. And I think it's important to note that work zones change. So you may drive through a work zone one day, and the next day the traffic pattern will be different. So people, again, need to be attentive to know that they still have to pay attention even if they drove through this work zone recently.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So the campaign this year is Don't Be That Driver, Work on Safety, Get Home Safely Every Day. So now you've been involved with this for how many years?
This is my 8th year.
So what do you do to try to help get the message out?
Well, one of the things that I really do when I drive through work zones, I try to model driving responsibly. Oftentimes people, when they see one of the long-term work zones coming, they try to race ahead because they know traffic's going to slow down. So I think something that each of us who really see a purpose, and I hope all of us do see a purpose in creating safe work zones for everyone, is to model that behavior, not feel pressured by drivers behind you. All of us are going to get to where we're going, and as you alluded to, I don't know the other side of our story. I don't know what it feels like to be a driver who causes the death of another person, and I hope that I never do. But I think that all drivers need to keep that in their minds, that through their actions, they're taking unnecessary risk, and a risk that could have a lifelong consequence. And they have to decide whether that's truly worth it or not. Beyond that, I really do take opportunities to talk about work zone safety among my friends, among my family. When I see things articles in the media that relate to work zone safety, I'll promote those through social media myself. I think there is a lot to do. And an important note for parents would be, we are our children's teachers from a very young age. Even children sitting in car seats in the back seat are learning driving practices from their parents. And so parents need to be aware of what they're teaching their children long before they're ready to get their permits through their driving behaviors on a daily basis, particularly in work zones because they are just that much more dangerous than the general roadways.
Well, I think that's a good message, and I think a little bit of the teacher in you is coming out because we are our children's first teacher for everything in their life. But I do think it's important that people know that they have to be prepared at all times for the uncertainties of driving, and that being alert and being prepared is key to that. And so I certainly want my children to be responsible drivers. I want to be a responsible driver, and I want to keep the employees, the public works employees that work in county government, safe. And we have other employees sometimes that are out along the roads too. We may have water and sewer employees. You may see telephone company workers, people who are out doing some kind of utility work along a roadway. And so there's all kinds of reasons for people to be out there working to make sure that our travelways are safe for us in the long run.
Yes.
And we need to respect the work that they're doing, respect them, and respect ourselves.
And we have to understand that this is their office. When they're out working on the road, they're in their offices, and cars become deadly weapons when people do not choose to drive responsibly. If they're inattentive, if they're reckless or aggressive in their driving, they are putting lives at risk. And these men and women, as you said, are doing a public service for us, and they deserve to go home to their families each night, as each of us expects to do. And that's something we need to focus on as drivers.
Now, you've been an advocate for this safety campaign every year, but I know you've also tried to change the laws about work zones. And can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, like it or not, I'm part of the speed monitoring devices here in Frederick County and across the state of Maryland because I do believe that we need to protect our workers as much as possible. And there is the controversy as to whether or not speed cameras actually contribute to accidents. Most a significant number of work zone crashes are rear-end collisions. We don't have the police manpower to be sitting in work zones, and often they're constructed that it would be dangerous to have chase cars going after motorists, so speed cameras make sense in that way. And it's important for me to point out, in order to be ticketed by a speed camera, the motorist has to be going 12 miles or above the posted speed limit. So these people are blatantly breaking the law
Right.
when they're getting those tickets. Additionally, I have also testified in support of making negligent driving have penalties at a slightly greater place if the driver has been negligent, grossly negligent in their actions. When Rick was killed, the driver received a ticketed fine, and that was all. And this isn't in any way to promote our families. Again, it's to promote safer driving, to put the idea there that you have to be responsible for your actions, and taking someone else's life has huge repercussions for generations and families.
Yes, I know it's had a big impact on you and your children, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody in Frederick County, that we are sympathetic and sorry for your loss. And I do think it's wonderful that you and your family have taken up Work Zone Safety Advocate as a campaign in your husband's memory,
Thank you.
and also to just really make sure no other family has this experience. So I really appreciate your hard work. And so I think, is there a final message you'd like to leave with people?
Maryland is using the campaign this year that work zone safety is in your hands, slow down and stay alert, and I think that is an important message for all people who travel through Maryland and beyond, actually. And I would just like to ask drivers to really focus on safe driving.
All right, well, thank you for joining me today. I think you've shared a lot of great information. It's another way to get the message out to people.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity very much.
Thank you for joining us today. We do want to promote work zone safety. It's to protect not just the worker, but you, the driver, and your own family. Let's make sure no more tragedies happen to any more families in our community, our state, and our country. Drive safely and get home safely.